Hi everyone, thanks for coming and joining us today. My name is Dustin. I'm a committee member at the Cryptocurrency Certification Consortium, which provides certification for cryptocurrency security standard, the Certified Bitcoin Professional and Certified Ethereum Professional. So today our conversation is about decentralization, opportunities and challenges for DAOs. Kindly sponsored by Koris, so it's providing the first operational system for DACs, that's digital autonomous corporations. Right. And we have three great panelists today. We have Natalia Emeline, that's right, and Decentralized Coordinator at the MetisDAO Foundation. We have Pavel. Should I try to pronounce his surname?
You could try.
Right. Sinelnikov, yes, and CEO and co-founder at Koris. And we have Ishita Nandini, and she's the crypto asset research analyst at Messari Crypto. So I think as an introductory question for everyone, first, how did you get into Web3?
I guess I can kick it off. Do you hear me okay? Yeah, looks like the mic works, yeah. Natalia Amelin. First time I heard about Web3 was back in 2012, where my son got involved in the space. At that point of time, I kind of was thinking that my main concern was, if he's getting into one of those drug dealer rings where, people go online and buy some illegal stuff and pay with it with some coins, etc. So I was a little bit concerned about his involvement in the space. But gradually I started learning more, and actually for this reason specifically. And eventually I realized that it's actually a very cool space. And at that point, my friend and I got so interested in it that she had an idea of starting the educational organization about blockchain, specifically for women, crypto chicks. And so we kicked it off back in 2016. And since then, we've been following the space. And recently I've joined MetisDAO. Metis is the layer 2 solution, but our grand vision is to build the infrastructure for the Web3 economy. And there I'm currently decentralized coordinator, as well as in charge of the ecosystem fund called Genesee.
Yeah, thank you, Natalia. Yeah, I got into the space a bit later, way later. Around 2012, I started out as a person who knew about crypto and about Ethereum, but what really kicked it off is that I was teaching people about it. And to teach people, you have to know it yourself. And how I got in that position is that I was working with crypto chicks. And essentially, we were developing educational applications and basically ways to showcase what Ethereum is and what can be built on top of it. This led me into exploring opportunities with Metis, and I was essentially the person involved in the technical evangelist. I was the person that was the tech guy, and then that evolved into some biz dev applications and other things related to that. So I came from a technical understanding, and then that changed to more of a business understanding. And so that's what helped me grow and understand more so about these different types of pathways. Thank you.
So I got excited about Web3 at the end of 2020, which is much later than you guys. So I had a bunch of artist friends that were starting to experiment with NFTs. So I collected a few pieces, and then from that, I kind of had this moment of realization that Web3 tools are actually going to permanently shift the future of the internet. And from that, the ideas of ownership and accessibility are actually going to materialize, because everyone that I met that worked in Web3 they lived by the ideals of Web3. So kind of got excited about that, and then got introduced to DAOs and joined a few. And then joined Messari, where I am now. So I started off by doing research around governance and looking at different DAOs and applications there.
All right, thanks for the introduction. So to start off the conversation, I'd like to start with Natalia. You've been in Web3 for a long time, so long ago that we were calling it blockchain back then. Why do DAOs matter to you?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Why do DAOs matter to you?
So, you know, when I think about the DAOs, I see a lot of possibilities. And I think the very first thing that comes to mind when I think about the DAOs is DAOs have this exciting promise of new organizational structures and decentralized collaboration for digital space and for the world. And I think with that comes so many opportunities, and we're just starting to tap into it. So the way I currently see the DAO space is it's like a big playground where people are testing out all the ideas that they have. We're looking at the world that we get to know over our lives, which is primarily operates in a centralized space with a lot of control, starting, you know, with your parents in the school, and then it translates into, you know, the government, putting the restrictions on how you lead your life, as well as, you know, at work, you have certain restrictions. When you look at the way regular companies operate, it's all within certain rules. And to some extent, it works. But also, there are things that we find could be done better. And I think that's where I see opportunities for DAOs. And I think that's kind of thing that people are excited to test in those playgrounds, really to look at, you know, what doesn't work and how we can make it greater. And, you know, when I say make it greater, greater doesn't necessarily mean one thing, right? It could be more efficient. It could be more fair, more diversified. You know, it has many shades, right? And finally, I think it also presents a lot of opportunities for people who previously maybe have been not as fortunate and removed from the resources. So DAOs offer them to kind of set up, you know, level playing field for everybody and get those people to participate in the economy, become active participant, and be compensated on a merit and not just by, you know, judged by the place where they come from.
Excellent. I'd like to jump over to 𝗚𝘕 and ask you, from your research, what opportunities have DAOs solved that make them different from traditional organizations or company structures?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of features of DAOs that are, you know, awesome, like open, they're decentralized, there's a loss of hierarchy, members of a DAO are dependent on smart contracts versus, you know, legal paper contracts. But I think the most compelling feature of a DAO is the speed at which you can start a DAO, form capital, and deploy it. And from that, a lot of use cases arise. So my favorite example is Constitution DAO, which is kind of silly, but within 2 days, Constitution DAO started a fundraiser and raised $40 million to put out a bid for the US Constitution, so a copy of the Constitution, and they lost it, but it kind of opens the opportunities for how many things you can do just by being on the internet, being a part of a DAO, and using crypto. So you can raise capital for a company, you can raise capital really quickly for charities, and so a lot of investment DAOs are doing well. There's a lot around, and I'm really excited about investment DAOs because of this. You can raise capital really quickly, and they democratize investing for a lot of people. And so I think we haven't seen the use cases that DAOs are capable of just yet. I think we're just getting started.
That's great. So we've talked about the opportunities. Let's now start with the challenges. So DAOs have exploded in growth, but that doesn't always mean that adoption is retained. Sometimes you've got problems where, you know, governance votes are not very well attended. So Pavel, can you share some of your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Dustin. My thoughts in terms of pure governance in DAOs. I think a lot of DAOs have actually shifted from just having this pure governance way of operating. I think Curve operates in, or Convex, sorry, operates that they have fail-safe operations. And a lot of foundational structures that DAOs currently use actually have fail-safe operations, where it's not just pure governance that governs the platform. It's also, does this align with the protocol's constitution? Does it align with the vision and the mission? And so potentially the legal operations can be vetoed if it doesn't align with the goals of a specific DAO. And I think that having anything just purely based on purely based on code or purely based on whoever has the most tokens will inevitably have a sway in the decision making that doesn't embody the true values of the protocol and the operations that it can do. So I think that there's ways that there can be fail-safes, there can be a bit of centralization in the developments of these different types of protocols and applications as a means to enact these different types of outputs that the DAO provides. So that's my thoughts on the challenges, where I think that, to sum up, that there should be fail-safes and there should be some level of veto power in the case where things just don't go right. And we saw that with the DAO in a way where, although there was a vote essentially saying that, hey, let's fork the chain, let's basically make it so that there's a different, we agree on something different, but there still is that ability to choose, and there still is that ability to move forward from there.
Interesting. And 𝗏𝗏𝘁𝗶𝘀𝗐𝗐, beyond the initial hype of DAOs, what do you see as major problems or things that you would like to solve using DAOs as a tool for that?
So the major problems with the DAOs, I think, for me, it seems as if I think we really need to get down the legal stuff because I think until we're DAOs operating in this kind of gray legal territory, it's very difficult for people to fully commit and kind of start building their lives around it, because at any moment of time, there could be somebody tapping on your shoulder and saying, hey, by the way, you're now liable for XYZ. And that's not a very great outcome for anybody. Today, DAOs, largely, depending on the territory where they're located, that would decide on their legal status. Again, when we look at the traditional companies are very well set up to protect its operation from the liability perspective. All the directors are insured, the companies have major insurance liability policies, but none of that exists in DAOs. I mean, on the mainstream, right? And I think ultimately it puts people who participate in the DAO, and I think Pavel touched on it during his presentation, at very large risk. And you need to think twice if that's the route you want to go to and path you want to take. So I think that is one major problem. Also, I think governance. I would like to see, more diverse, maybe multi-layered governance structures. I feel today, from my recent experience, the governance is, okay, you're a whale, you have 4 whales, they can, basically vote for you. So if you're friends with them, that's great. If you're not, then bad luck. Come back later. I don't think it's fair, and I don't think that's what the space stands for. So I think we need to move away from this, coin voting into something which is more fair for everybody, right? Another aspect of the voting is the qualifications, right? So you can have members in a DAO come in there for different reasons, from different walks of life, different backgrounds. Some of them have more knowledge and expertise on the topic than the others. So the question then that I'm asking myself is, should those people be given more weight when the vote on a certain topic occurs, or is it just we need more people and we need to vote and hope that the bell curve pushes us in the right direction, right? And ultimately, I think I would like to see the governance structure, as I said, multi-layered and based on their reputation. And definitely think that will be something very interesting to see how that plays out, right? Another topic on that is, how do you fund your governance? Because governance doesn't come free. So lots of DAOs are facing this perspective. How do we have sustainable funding to fund the governance process? I think that's another topic that also needs, thought and major conversations around it. As well as the final one for me is succession planning. We're all very excited to start new things, and but eventually people, the life happens, people will move on to another project, etc. So we need to make sure within the DAO that we have like a company, or like let's say on the level of the government. One prime minister quits, we have one president quits, we have the process. Who will be the next leader? So the same within the DAO. We have a DAO leader who we accustomed to rely on, but what if this leader moves on to the next project? What happens then? We need to have mechanism in place so the DAO doesn't fall apart. So I think these are the challenges that I see.
Thanks so much. 𝗔𝘗𝘚𝘐, would you like to explain like the challenges DAOs face right now that maybe prevent them from being evolved or being used more? What are the adoption challenges? What are the things that they need to do to improve the situation with getting people to adopt?
Yeah, I think that I agree with Natalia. I think the lack of legal clarity is probably a big one. So DAOs don't have a very great legal framework yet. So there's the Wyoming DAO LLC, and then some DAOs just use a typical LLC, and it's not the perfect solution for DAOs, but it's a way to protect member liabilities. And on the contributor side, the contributors are also at risk, like if you don't have a really good framework to protect them. And so as a contributor, it's almost terrifying to join a DAO without that protection, because if you have a family or whatever, like you're kind of putting a lot at risk. So I think the legal side is a big thing, but I think that just also is a consequence of the broader crypto regulatory problem. And on the contributor side, I think that there's a lot of issues around standardization. So across all DAOs, there's no agreed on practices for hiring, managing contributors, or onboarding them. And so there's a lot of broken practices, and I think that's the common theme is there's a lack of standardization for DAOs and its members. And I think that's because DAOs are kind of on this phase where they're experimenting. So every DAO has their own ideas, they're testing out new ways to do things, and I think that's just part of the process, and we'll find out what sticks or not. But I think protecting contributors is the first step, and we're not doing that very well.
Thanks for that feedback. Pavel, in terms of solutions, what tools do you think Web3 companies need to improve the current state of like DAO and maybe even DAC adoption?
I think there's a lot of tools out there. And I think that there is alternatives that are out there that are present. And with that, there's kind of an agreed upon standard where everyone's like, okay, we're going to use this TCP/IP standard, or we're going to use this smart contract standard. So standardization is one of the ways that people use these different types of tools. There's also different types of standards that lawyers would use and rely on, and there's also things that's different types of tools that marketers would rely on. And I think it comes down a lot of the time to personal preference, but also about cost and usability, where since there's a lot of tools, there's a lot to choose from, you want to be very direct and you want it to be very sustainable. But the way that a lot of adoption would work is you pick something, it works good enough, and then you go with it. Unfortunately, that does lead to situations where that now you're working with 50 Excel sheets that you need to combine together, and that you're using email as your communication or Telegram as your communication platform, that you're managing all of these different types of channels and chats, and then it ends up being it limits the productivity. So I think that with tools, with options comes responsibility, comes power to choose. But I think that there will never be like one tool will work for everyone's case. Everyone will have their own personal preference, but there might be something that works well on the business standpoint, where because it increases, because it decreases costs, because it's good enough to use that people will use it for work, right? Like project management tools, there's a lot of them, and then it comes down to personal preference. But at the same time, right, they'll all do the same thing, and it works. But I think that expanding on that, picking a solution, going with it, adapting to it, and then when inevitably you need to switch, then thinking about it at that time when you're big enough. So I think that's the roadmap, at least in my head. So start small, and then once you're there, when you need to switch, and then that's the easiest.
Cool. So we've covered like what we think the challenges are. Now let's like look in the future, and what do we think that DAOs can help achieve? What are the they provide coordination. They allow us to and like get a market of people across the globe. What problems can we solve with DAOs?
I guess I'll start. As I said earlier, I think DAOs are very fascinating, exciting thing, and many opportunities are still to come, right? But aside from the social DAOs that we're starting to see, or the DAOs that are organized around certain purpose, I would like to, I'm actually very interested in seeing government working with DAOs, or are organizing maybe governmental departments into DAOs and working like that. I know, hard to believe, but I think what DAOs do their decentralized nature, they provide the transparency, and with transparency comes greater accountability. And I think with some governments, there is an appetite to, to have this extra level of transparency, and maybe to, build a new reputation. And I think we already start seeing some experiments of the governments, right? So we talked about the Colorado government, which has been experimenting with DAOs for a while. Recently, there was in the news the Japanese government, the digital department organized the DAO to kind of study how the things work and what they can accomplish within the DAO there. But I think in general, there are many opportunities with DAOs for the governments to become more transparent and more reliable. Like one example that comes to my mind is, I used to work with procurement in RFP. And in many countries, this is the area of which is tarnished with a lot of bribing and corruption. And I think if you want to turn the page and change this culture, that could be done through the DAO, organizing the participants, for example, vendors and suppliers, and making the vendors to submit this, provide their submissions through the DAO so that they get public review. There is a public vote by the government, proper government representatives, and then the funds are issued, and the tranches are then become very transparent, available to the public to examine, and they can actually see where the money goes and how they're being spent. I think that type of transparencies, together with the magic of DAOs and blockchain, could be very interesting to see in the future, right? And I think already we talked about, I'm also excited about the investment DAOs, not necessarily just who pull the funds together to invest into anything, but investing with a purpose, right? So we, for example, have examples of DAOs that pull the funds to invest in longevity, or to invest into the research on certain topic. I think that could be also very powerful. But I'm going to go back to my point. The legal structure is very important here.
Yeah, so I think transparency and accessibility are big things. And so around transparency, people all over the world can join any type of DAO they want. This is also like a future idealistic view when we have perfect legal structures for DAOs. So people, when they can be anon, they can join any organization. People can do powerful things. And we've never seen that before in any other type of organization. And I think that's super exciting. And I think on the transparency side, like I'm really excited about DeSci because these DAOs are coming together and they're trying to disrupt science research, like some of them. And I think that's really interesting because science research, that whole industry is a little bit cryptic. So DAOs can come about, they can redo experiments and bring more transparency to that. And I think that's really exciting. There's such an onslaught of different things that people can do with DAOs, and I think like the features of transparency, accessibility, empower more people than ever before.
Yeah. How I see DAOs operating in the future, I like the points made, like DeSci as well as government style. I think DAOs are very well suited for government-like structures that everyone has a voice, or most people have a voice. You know, there's some that are run by tokens or soulbound or NFTs. But I think that with greater expansion, we're going to need more than government to run things. So governance is good. We have common opinions, common direction, where it's like a sense of common sense. Where should I go? Where should I direct things? I think that where the value would be provided to these types of government-like structures, when things need to get done, government contracts to other entities, to other businesses. They make a decision, enact a proposal, and then someone else does the work. And I think that having structures that operate in this traditional-based way is important. So I think that more and more structures will be for DAOs, to do work for DAOs, to do contracts for DAOs, to do services for DAOs. And with that, you want that to be in the decentralized space as well, to know what's actually getting done and being transparent as well. And then in that way, I think DAOs can actually be stronger than most governments, where everything is more or less transparent, and you can see that transparently work is getting done. So I think that that's where the future would hold for these different types of DAO structures, where eventually they'll operate like business.
Following on your point, that's actually like my greatest hope for DAOs, which is I feel that a lot of the challenges that we face in the world are tragedy of the commons problems with climate, with sustainability. And we have centralized institutions, supranational organizations that deal with those issues, but in some cases you have, you know, climate summits where they fly private jets to. So I think that we all see that there are some issues there, and I think that if DAOs can actually form part of the tooling that allows us to coordinate in a global scale, that allows us to help solve these problems, then we're along the way to a better future. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.